Okay, so to create power, what we need to do, one of the things that we do with our muscles is we create the force with our muscles. So what we wanted to talk about was just briefly go over the muscle groups that are used in these different kinds of activities.
You can see in the diagram here, there's more than just quads, biceps, and chest, and some glutes. There are a huge array of muscles synergistically working together to help you generate force and power. So we think about the main sports we're competing in. You know, cycling, mountain biking, any form of cycling really. We have sitting and standing. So yes, overall they're going to utilize the same sort of quadricep calf muscle, but the way in which they're using them is going to be very different.
Primarily, when we're cycling, what we're going to use is glutes, quads to generate our power, right? So if you think about your typical cyclist that you might imagine in something like the Pro Tour, really skinny arms, and that's because all they're really doing with their arms is holding their body weight up. The arms aren't really being used to do work. They're just there to hold the person up when they're using their legs to propel themselves forward. So the arm muscles can't really create a lot of force because they're not highly trained, whereas the legs are nicely highly trained. You think about that cyclist again, nicely developed quads and calves and, you know, great looking legs. And that's because they're so developed and they're used so much. So we get really tired when we start to stand when we're cycling. And the reason we do that is because we are suddenly having to support our body weight with our legs, whereas before it was on the seat. And we're having to support it with our legs and also with our arms. So we're suddenly using a lot more oxygen because we have a lot more muscles being used and a lot more force has to be created at the same power. So suddenly we're using our arms, and this cyclist with really skinny arms, they kind of have a hard time holding themselves up because their arms aren't that developed. So suddenly we need more oxygen, and that's why we might see our heart rate increase when we stand, when we're cycling. And we're also holding our body weight up, so we need to create more force at the same power when we're standing.
We then start to require a greater muscle mass or a more trained muscular system, rather than, say, if we went all the way to cycling, and a seated cyclist is not going to require their upper body almost at all, besides just keeping themselves upright. Whereas running, swimming, and then into triathlon, especially with the long distance triathlon requiring to be in the aerobar position, there's a greater amount of muscle mass. And so these muscles are used in different ways. You've got prime movers and synergistic supporting muscles, but the O2 cost is greater. And that all contributes to a greater rate of fatigue, and it contributes to the whole holistic system of your threshold, your training zones, and everything that comes together when training an athlete. So yeah, there's a slight amount of upper body, and then that is different for, say, trail running, because especially ultra trail running, you're going to require a pack. You're going to require to carry compulsory gear, and oftentimes you're carrying around 2 kgs or 4 or 5 pounds worth of weight on your back. And then maybe you even need poles if you're doing like a mountain trail ultra. But then if you're a track runner, say distance track runner, 10,000 meter, I don't know if you've ever seen those people, but they are extremely tiny. The use of their arms is not as great as, say, a sprinter, where they can add propulsive force through the movement of their arms and just the sheer accelerating mass of them as a being, because a lot of what they're trying to achieve comes from the start. Yes, it's like anything, right? It depends. It depends on what the sport is and who you are, because if you are a 7-foot, 400-pound runner, you're going to require a lot more arm propulsive force, or at least contribute to, the overall momentum and pendulum of running to add to your forward motion, than if you're a 50 kg kind of, 110 pound little 10,000 meter track runner.
One of the things that I always thought was really cool is the reason you swing your arms when you're running, and if you try running without swinging your arms, because there's so much mass in your legs that when they're swinging, right, and one's going forward, one's going backwards, if you didn't move your arms and you held them to your side, your whole body would twist. So what you're doing when you're running, you have the opposite arm moving to your leg, and that stops your body from twisting, and you can kind of
Okay, Matt, well, along the same
I just
lines,
thought
what
that was really
about
cool.
the different forms of cycling? Like, well, I think, cycling can be, or cyclists could still be downhill races.
Yeah, absolutely, or any kind of mountain bikers. And one of the things that we really have to do when we're mountain biking is support our body weight, because we don't actually sit as much as a pure road cyclist would. And one of the other things that happens in mountain biking is that we have a lot of vibrations that we need to dampen. So a lot of my research was around vibrations, and if we weren't able to dampen those vibrations using our muscles, our whole head would shake and then our brain would be out of whack. So we adopt this strategy with our upper body to dampen those vibrations. And that's why at least one of the reasons why we see riders' heart rates increase when they're going downhill. That's because they're damping these vibrations, even if they're not pedaling. Their heart rate and their oxygen uptake can get really high. So it's not just about using the legs, it's about using the upper body to support the rest of the body, control the bike, and dampen vibrations.